About to go live here. Give it a second here for everything to connect. Okay, make sure it's doing all right. Check the stream. There we go. Okay, looks like we are live. See who we got here. Okay. Hey everybody, good evening, and thanks for tuning in. Right now, since it's just starting, you're probably looking at the recording of this. But thanks for tuning in to TEN Evening News. Usually we'll be doing a lot of headlines, things that are going on in the world of EVE. But tonight we're actually going to kind of talk about a specific topic after we do the little headlines. And we're going to be talking a bit about faction warfare and basically the death of a good thing, which was faction warfare, and how it is just kind of an ugly husk of what it used to be. If you're just tuning in, I will be watching the Twitch chat for questions and whatnot, but if you are in game in EVE, you can go to the TEN Evening News chat channel if you want to pop in there, and you can always ask your questions in there. We'll update that as necessary, and so on and so forth. I'm watching both areas for any questions or whatever that will pop up. So, let's see here. I'm going to check Discord, see what's going on in there. What's going on in here? See if we got anything going on in there. No, I guess not. Nothing in there. Okay, so just kind of sitting in station tonight with sitting here in my stealth bomber, as I'm wont to do. I am quite a fan of the stealth bomber. Actually, it's always been something I like. Sorry, I was doing two things at once, and that is pretty crappy of me. So I apologize for that. So anyway, you have my full attention now. So. Not a lot in the way of headlines so since the last show, which was just 3 days ago, but I'm gonna go ahead and pull up my little thing here. Other than I think most people know that there's been some movements in nullsec. The pandemic horde's going to be shifting around a little bit where they're living at, for you nullsecers that are interested in that. If you want information on it, you can pretty much go over to Imperium.news, the Goon propaganda website, but they have a little write-up. Pandemic Horde announces, it's done by Savvy Neil. Pandemic Horde announces move out of Gem and Perimeter, shifting focus to Branch. I'm not going to go too much into it because you can read it as you'd like, but basically they're consolidating where they're going to be. They're moving a bunch of their assets over to the Branch area. Different ideas on why that's happening. You get some people that are saying, oh, they're running scared. You get other people saying, oh, it's just consolidation. Whatever, it's nullsec. This shit happens all the time. The other big thing going on right now, which is really cool, is EVE Vegas is underway. Okay, there's probably a few live streams going on from people doing the various things there. There's apparently like over 1,100 people this year going to EVE Online, to EVE Vegas, which is pretty cool. I've never been to EVE Vegas. I've been to FanFest. I've never been to Vegas, but it looks like they got a pretty cool schedule. So tomorrow they're actually kicking everything off. At 2 p.m. they'll be doing the opening ceremony and the CCP presentation. 4 o'clock they'll do the EVE Online keynote. Don't know exactly what that is, like what the keynote is going to be. I know what a keynote is. On Saturday the 20th at 11 a.m. they're going to start talking about upwell structures in the future, followed by Project Nova, and then ending the day with ships and balance discussion. On Sunday they will open the day probably quite hungover. Introduce the new activity tracker. Then they'll be discussing events and the agency. I'm interested to hear about what's going on with the agency, what they're doing there, just out of curiosity, because I don't know, it's not something I use very often, but it's it's there, and I want to see what they plan on doing with it. And then at 5 p.m. on Sunday, they'll do the closing ceremony, and everyone will cry and hug each other and promise to not kill each other in space. And they'll leave, and they'll go back on their planes and their cars and their buses and whatever else, and they will head home and back to our boring, stupid lives that don't revolve around Eve. Checking in at Eve Vegas. Okay, so that's pretty much what's going on, but it's supposed to be quite a lot of fun. There's going to be the Eve Vegas 2018 party, Dre's Club. The overwhelming love for Dre's Beach Club and nightclub seen at last year's Eve Vegas. It makes sense to party on the rooftop once again. Party kicks off at 7 o'clock. Features 3 hours of open bar service until Dre's opens up to the public at 10 o'clock p.m. A business casual dress code will be in effect for the whole evening, so this means no hoodies, flip-flops, shorts, t-shirts, face paint, or face masks are permitted. Any of you guys that are, I don't know why you'd be watching this if you're at Eve Vegas right now, but if you're in Vegas and you're going to this, don't act stupid. Vegas is still pretty tender over the whole shooting incident, so don't walk around acting suspicious. It's in poor taste and it's a bad idea. So CCP Falcon stressed the dress code's importance to prevent issues with being admitted to the club, and make sure you pack some nice clothes. The club has a dress code because it's that kind of club. It's not because of the shooter issue, but there have been people that some of our friends who have gone to Vegas and they were just acting the fool, and they got stopped and questioned. So it's just don't be in bad taste. Which, for the most part, we do bad taste in game in Eve, but we don't do bad taste in real life. So yeah. Let's see here. So Eve Vegas, that's the big news right now. That's what's going on currently. So what I want to do though is talk about faction warfare. Now, something that if you've watched TEN Evening News in the past, you know that faction warfare is something in EVE Online that's near and dear to my heart. I always found it to be the good balance between you want the good fights that you get in nullsec, but at the same time you want to be involved in some of the storyline and PvE content that is high sec. Okay, there's not a great amount of high sec storyline, I understand that, but faction warfare low sec was kind of the place that you can get the melding of those different aspects of Eve. Okay, just like wormhole guys talk about, they like their wormholes because it's a little more private, but there is still some danger involved, but they get to kind of make their own world within Eve. That's how I saw faction warfare. It was kind of my way to be a part of the Eve universe and do something a little more than just farm ISK and get into bigger ships and then keep growing and growing and growing. We had a purpose. We had something we were fighting for that actually affected more than just our little alliance. Okay, so I think when people get involved in faction warfare, that's their outlook is, I want to be involved in something that's a little cooler than just cruising around high sec, but maybe I don't have, I don't think I have what it takes to get in the null sec, or I don't have the time dedication to do it. When I got involved in faction warfare, it was about 5 years ago, and it was right after they did the revamp, and when faction warfare, they said, CCP came out and said, we're going to actually do something with it. We're going to make it worth playing. It was an aspect that they had admitted they had overlooked quite often, and it had become kind of the bastard child of EVE Online. For about a year, a year and a half, things were fun in faction warfare. There was a lot of really active, really good alliances in all the different areas. I mean, I played mostly Ammar, and I was with the Fwetic guys, the I Whip My Slaves Back and Forth guys, and they were a hoot. I mean, they were seriously some of the coolest gamers I've ever played games with. They were fun to be around. They didn't take shit, but at the same time, they knew how to have a good time. And we were able to get in some pretty good fights. And we engaged whenever we could. we pretty much fought the Minmatar when I was playing. We pretty much fought them to a standstill, which was great because at the time they were just before Fwedit came along. They kind of ran amok. They owned that area of space. The Amarr Minmatar warfront. They owned it, and then in came this big rush of faction warfare players and these guys that were pretty serious about it, and that changed things. Made it a good fight. The Caldari and the Gallente have always had kind of their balance, and it has gone back and forth in the past. My understanding now is that it's not that way. When I look at if you look at the faction warfare maps, you can see that it's. Let me see if it's over here somewhere. No, I don't want to pull it up over there anyway. You'll see that it's pretty one-sided on each one of the fronts now. The Gallente have pretty much spanked the Caldari into submission. Two of the large Caldari alliances have walked away. They're going to do their own things. I believe one of them's going to Nullsec. They've decided they're going to move on to bigger and better. That happens. Fwedit did that too. They kind of decided they were going to move on to go into Nullsec, and I guess that's kind of a maturing process. It's a graduation, as it were, of these alliances where they say, okay, we're at that point now that we're large enough and strong enough, we can go ahead and go on to the next, what we consider the next level, right? Pardon me while I get a drink. So when that happens, if there's not enough players, if there's not enough interest in that particular aspect of the game, faction warfare in this particular case, then all that's really doing is creating a huge vacuum. It's creating this hole where there used to be activity and now there's none. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and wax nostalgic about all the great things we did in faction warfare back in the day and how much I miss it. We could talk about that at other times. What I really want to talk about now is how faction warfare has been rebastardized. You know, I got a lot of love for CCP. They've done some really cool things with this game over the past, 14 or so years. But yet again, faction warfare has been orphaned. It's just not getting the love or the attention it needs. It either needs to be completely overhauled and the attention paid to it, or they need to drop it and just let low-sec be low-sec. There's really no punishment if someone not involved in faction warfare, just an independent, whatever you want to call them, comes into one of the areas, the faction warfare areas where there's action happening, and they start mucking about. You can't even, as a faction warfare person, if they're coming in and wrecking things that are going on, you can't even go after them without getting flagged. Okay, so it kind of causes a problem, which if you think about how warfare works, that doesn't even make sense. If you come into my, as a military guy, if you come into my zone and you start fucking about, you're probably going to get put on the hit list, right? I mean, that's any military. So just don't get it. Hey, everybody who just joined in, thanks for stopping by. Throw a like if you get a chance and you like what's going on in here. Ask questions, okay? This isn't about me pontificating about the aspects of EVE. I like this to be more of an open discussion. That's why we do these. If you've never seen the Tactical Entertainment Network shows before, back in the past when we did them a while ago, I am not proclaiming myself to be any type of EVE Online genius. I am a facilitator. I take questions that I think are important to the community. I present them, and I like to get different opinions on it, different viewpoints. So, you guys out there, we want to hear from you. Obviously keep it, somewhat tasteful. I mean, I'm an EVE player. I can handle the shit posting, but let's try to be somewhat on topic with it, right? So, my point with tonight's discussion is, faction warfare either needs to completely change or it needs to go away. And if it goes away, honestly, at this point, that's fine. That's fine. Open it up, just make low-sec, and it's just an area that you either, as a high-secker, you would graduate to start getting a little more involved in the player versus player aspect of it. Or if you're a null-secker and you kind of need a little bit of break from what goes on out there, which, I mean, I don't know why you would, but if that's what it is, that's how you feel, do that. Make it, if it's a buffer zone between high sec and low sec, then make it a kind of a market area. I don't know how else to put that. That it kind of is right now anyway, where nullsec butts up against the higher security areas. Lowsec's a good place for growing corporations and whatnot to maybe have their industrial business, so they can help feed. They can feed those that need the ships and the equipment, and they can get the materials they need from the other side as well. So it becomes that good central point. That needs to happen, and kind of make that what it is. Make that the purpose of lowsec, or continue with this faction warfare thing and actually make it worth going into. Right? Farming loyalty points was a thing that we had to do, and there were some good rewards for it, but it kind of got to the point where the tedium was beyond mining. It was just so numb that I got to farm these 100,000 points. I got to go do this. Let me go do this new area. Let me go in and run this mission. It became completely mind numbing. So it was basically just like a higher risk, high sec at that point with faction warfare. The big battles have not been occurring like they used to. And when I'm talking big battles, this is obviously not like, major, like when the goons or the pandemic or whoever, when everybody goes at it, those kind of big, awesome, battles that are remembered, on YouTube. But they were still good fights. 30 against 30, 40 against 40, whatever it was. There were some good fights. It just doesn't happen anymore. And for CCP to kind of not pay attention to that, they've kind of just like, oh man, faction warfare, don't even want to talk about that. That's kind of a slap in the face for the people who have really tried to make it work. There's some corporations out there, some alliances, and some individuals who have worked their ass off in this game to try to make faction warfare a fun and exciting place to be. And there's been no reward, no karmic reward for that from up top. I haven't even seen, like, from the CSM minutes where anyone really gave a real rat's ass about faction warfare. I remember, again, we're talking back 5-6 years ago now, when we actually had people from faction warfare running for the CSM because they wanted to get on there and try to make it more than it was. And there was a lot of attention around it. Yeah, there was some great improvements over what it was before, but then it was like, okay, kind of, let's do the hand washing, and that's it. We're done with it. It's never gone past that point. So, kind of a frustrating thing for those of us who kind of had the love for the faction warfare. Here, I'll move my ship for you guys, so you're not just looking at the same all the time. It's a Purifier. It's quite a cool stealth bomber there. Hi, can I help you? I'm getting a visitor. Yeah, I'm live. What's the matter? Alright. It's no big deal. So, there you go. Look at my butt. Look at my ship's butt. So, I guess my whole point with this, guys, is faction warfare. For those who have never played it, you haven't missed anything. I hate to say it. You haven't missed anything. But for those that are just getting into it or thinking about it, maybe some alpha pilots out there, alpha clone pilots that are thinking about, I'd like to get into this. I'd like to check it out. If you're going to do that, guys, find a corporation that's really active in it. Find an alliance that's really active. I can't even tell you right now, off the top of my head, any that are like super duper active in it. And if they are, they're probably on the side that is so heavily tilted toward winning, that is winning right now, that you might not be getting any good fights. You basically become a bunch of loyalty point farmers. Is that good? I don't know. I mean, from the standpoint of advancing your character's collection of equipment and ships, I guess so. But I got into faction warfare for the story and the fights. It just really isn't there. Oh, and I'm sorry if I got the breath popping on this. I go tomorrow to get my new mic out of storage, my good mic out of storage. It's been a while since I used it, so I only had this available. I do apologize. So taking that all into consideration, we got a couple people in here. Kind of, I don't know. You guys might be in Eve doing your thing while you're listening to my annoying voice. If so, like I said, pop in to the TEN Evening News channel in the your little chat channels we have in Eve. That way, at least you can also see when we go live and whatnot. It'll be posted in there. But if you got questions, you've got concerns, you've got an opinion on this matter, let us know. I would really like to know what you guys think about this. Boom, boom, boom. Sorry, I had someone on Discord was popping me a message. I would really like to know what you guys think about this because, I mean, there's really... Let's talk about the different aspects of Eve, the different things you can do to focus on. All right, so you can be a miner in Eve, right? You could be a miner. You could be an industrialist. You could be a trader. You could be a hauler. You can be a mission runner. You could be a high-sec pirate. You can go into null-sec and do most of those things we've already talked about. But for the most part, null-sec, you're going to have a lot of industrialists, a lot of miners, and then the combat guys. And of course, those lines are blurred. Some of us do, all of the above or whatever. We do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. For low-sec, you've got then you've got your wormhole guys, right? For faction warfare, for low-sec, you've got your guys that are out there farming gas to make boosters and other things. You've got your gankers and pirates that are trying to catch people passing through. And then you've got what we're calling now your orphaned faction warfare guys. So again, if you take out that aspect of Eve and you just say faction warfare is no longer a thing, it's no longer a thing. I don't think at this point you're going to hurt the game. I hate to say that. I really do. However, to grow that aspect of it, I think would actually behoove CCP for the alpha clones that are in the game, because it does give a great opportunity for these guys to go out and participate in something quite fun. All right. It is definitely a good transition area. There's even when you do the this agency thing, when you do your starter or whatever it is, not agency, the little aura girl pops up, the little tutorial chick for new player experience. When you finish all of your combat ones, combat and advanced combat, she says something along the lines of now you got your destroyer, you're at that point where we can't teach you anymore, blah 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 blah. I don't know the exact wording. Now other options open up to you, and they even say such as faction warfare, and they give you that as an option, hey, why don't you go check out faction warfare? The problem is new player experience is kind of in a way nudging newer players toward that faction warfare, which is broken. So it's kind of setting people up for failure, in my opinion. You're sending someone toward an aspect of the game that is orphaned, that is not being cared for. So that's definitely going to be a question I have when I get a couple of the CCP guys on the stream for our upcoming interviews. Is going to be, what's the plan with that? What are we actually looking forward to with the faction warfare? Have any of you guys has anyone that's listening right now, have any of you guys been participating in it? I mean, I can't tell me I'm wrong is where I'm at. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me that, nah, Spence, man, you're an idiot. It is a lot of fun and it's worth participating in. I mean, we look back 5 years ago when I did the Faction Warfare Roundtable, we had 3,000 people listening into that live show, and Eve players, and we had me and 6 other Faction Warfare heads, and I wasn't a head of anything. I was just the host, the moderator, but 6 corporate and alliance heads from the different from different sides of faction warfare. We had some minis, we had some Caldari, we had Amarr, and we had the Galentis, and all these guys were on there talking about faction warfare and the great things about it, and the things that they were looking for that needed to get changed, and the good fights we were having, and why people should come to it, and what to expect when you come to it, and why new players should be really considering it as a good avenue after they learned a little bit of how to play the game. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking like get into a rifter and figure out how to tackle, right? So we went from that 3,000 people on a live stream listening to 7 people chat about faction warfare to if you bring up faction warfare nowadays, people are just like, man, I don't even know what's up with that shit. So it's just kind of a sad state of affairs for it. So if you're unsure what faction warfare is, I'm not trying to, I'm not really dumbing it down for anybody, but if you're a newer player, faction warfare is a game mechanic whereby you can sign up to fight for one of the 4 Imperial factions against its chosen enemy faction, and it also puts you into slight sandpaper conflict with whoever their ally is. For instance, if you're a Caldari player, then your natural ally is the Amarr, your natural enemy is the Galenti, and your sandpaper, not on the best of terms, is the Minmatar. Okay, simply because the Galenti and the Minmatar are allied, and the Minmatar and the Amarr are at odds. Okay, makes sense. You fight for control over certain areas of low-sec space. It was first introduced in 2008. That was the Empyrean Age update. And it was kind of supposed to be a stepping stone for players to get into heavier PvP, player versus player gameplay. Faction warfare is primarily centered around 2 war zones, areas of low sec contested by 2 empires, the Amarr Minmatar war zone and the Caldari Galente war zone, which each are located on the border of the 2 respective empires. In these war zones, players who participate in faction warfare attempt to conquer star systems for their empire and are rewarded with loyalty points and increased faction standings for their efforts. Loyalty points can, of course, just like doing missions and whatnot, can be used to buy specialty gear and ships. Additionally, as players who participate in faction warfare are effectively at war with 2 of the 4 Empire factions of the game, they can therefore attack and be attacked by players fighting for the enemy factions anywhere in New Eden, as well as fight the enemy NPC faction navies who patrol the high-sec star systems belonging to their faction. So as an example of that, if I ever needed for some reason to travel out of Amarr space when I was in Amarr faction warfare, and I wanted to go to, I don't know, somewhere over in Galenti space, whenever I would pass through the jump gates, when I would get through, I would get that notice saying, be careful, you will be fired upon, you're in enemy space. So I would usually fly through in a cloaky if I had to go through there for some reason. That way I had that little, once you had your cloak timer on the jump, and then I can hit that real quick cloak and jump. Yeah, you could be anywhere in high sec, be roaming around, and all of a sudden you'd see somebody flash up on your screen that's red to you, like, oh, here we go, we got some faction warfare going down right here. So it could get fun, it could get a little hairy, it could get dangerous, but it could get fun. So let me talk a little bit. I'm just scanning through something here I want to see. You could join as a solo or a corporation. I can't imagine joining as a solo would be a lot of fun. Being in a corp at least gave you the chance to go do patrols and whatnot, and it gave you a chance to group up in a good fleet and then go out and go really hit the zones you were trying to take over. Core mechanics of faction warfare revolve around capturing and holding star systems in the war zones. It was 2 steps. First is attacking and completing complexes, plexing we called it, in the system to make the system vulnerable to capture. Once the system went vulnerable, attack and destroy the system's infrastructure hub, the iHubs, to capture the system. That's usually at that point if you had an enemy worth its salt, if faction warfare was going well, those iHubs would become huge battles. huge battles. But if you got them, if you kind of caught them with their pants down, you can come in and hit it pretty hard and take it over. System starts off as stable or uncontested. The attacking faction, for instance, pilots flying for Galenti, attack a Caldari-held system, must first attack complete complexes in the system, offensive plexing. For each completed complex, the system becomes a little bit more contested, also measured in victory points. Once a system has become 100% contested, it's listed as vulnerable, and that's when the attacks on the iHub can begin. After it goes down, it goes into its downtime. During this time, the defending faction can complete complexes, defensive plexing, and that way they can try to counter what was going on with what you were doing. So there was usually a two-pronged way that happened. You would have, if it was when faction warfare was healthy, of course that's what we're talking about. While, like, let's say the Amarr would be plexing, offensively plexing in mini space, Minmatar space, they would have people going out and try to find us and hit us when we were hitting our plexes to disrupt our offensive plexing, while at the same time running their own plex missions to try to restabilize what we were doing, to offset what we were doing. So that can get pretty hairy. And sometimes, I mean, we'd have the two groups, we'd bump into each other full force. There's a lot of solo guys, and I don't mean solo as in not part of a faction warfare. They were part of a faction warfare corporation, but they were out running by themselves, and they'd be in some type of a fast or a cloaky ship, and they would sneak into Minmatar space, and they would run their 4 plex missions at a time, and they would do it solo, and they were just real good at paying attention to what was going on, so they wouldn't get caught with their pants down. They'd go in, they'd hit those plexes really quick, then they'd get out, right? And that's how you farm those loyalty points. So there's a lot of guys that became really good at that, and they made a lot of money off the stuff they got on the loyalty stores. Trying to see. You can upgrade the systems. Players participating in faction warfare can donate loyalty points they earned in their militia corporation to upgrade the star systems, which their faction currently holds. To do this, they must fly to the system's infrastructure hub, right-click on it, select Open System Upgrade Panel, and select how much LP they would like to donate. This window also lists the benefits for upgrading. Lower broker fees, lower costs for industry, and whatnot. So that really, it did help, like especially if you were trying to take that system. Now, if you own the system and you were able to hold it and keep it solid, keep it your faction solid, nice and insulated, maybe get it behind the lines a bit with some buffer from other between the war zone front. That right there is where I was talking about, like that ideal, make the LOSEC a buffer zone for industrialists. Ideally, you could do that. Right? That was kind of, I think, at one point the goal was you can actually do that. The problem was there was hardly ever a time in the grand scheme of things since 2008 that faction warfare had enough back and forth going on that faction warfare was healthy enough to have established stuff like that. So that's kind of been part of the problem. The different tiers, 1 through 5, also gave more LP rewards for doing loyalty point rewards for doing your plexes. Missions, destroying enemy player ships. Standings and ranks. You did get rank. I mean, again, if you're kind of into the, I don't know if you want to call it the PvE aspect of it. Let me kind of show you here real quick. Like character decorations. Like here, if you look at the decorations for me, right here it says Caldari State. I was considered a Protectorate Ensign, and for the Amarr Empire, I was a Templar Lieutenant. Right. So on this character, that's as high as I got with that. So that was, I mean, it wasn't too hard. That was the second tier with him. I didn't run a lot on Aridus with that because he's kind of my podcaster tune. My other characters are what I really did a lot of the running in. But when I did a lot of it mostly in. I really liked running around in stealth bombers. I had lots of fun doing that. So let's see here. So going back to what I was reading. there has been external links. Hold on, I'm trying to see if there's anything. I'm going to do a search real quick. Faction Warfare had its last... Here we go. Faction Warfare Mechanics Update, February 24th, 2018. So we're going on 8 months. Since there was even... That wasn't even an actual update. That was somebody proposing an update. I mean, people... I feel bad because, like, this guy brought up a topic. This is on the EVE Online forums. This guy, Andy Death, he brought up a topic about faction warfare, and nobody... And he's trying to talk to discuss about some updates and such that need to happen, and he never even got a response from anyone. Like, nobody even gave a shit enough to talk about it. And that kind of sucks. Let's see. Brave Collective did on July 18th, they did a guide about faction warfare. And it's really, I mean, for available fleets, plexing, it's just a general information on what to do. It's almost like a more colorful version of the EVE University stuff. I mean, cool for Brave Collective that they did that, but there's just really not a lot going on out there. There was a website called factionwarfare.com. They haven't updated it in 2 years. So that right there tells you how popular that is. Reddit, on Reddit, talking about faction warfare is dead. That was back in August of 2018. It's kind of sad. I feel like I'm almost looking at like an obituary when I'm looking at this. So sorry guys, I'm not trying to be quiet. I'm not trying to create dead air here. I was reading something real quick. I'm not trying to bore you guys any more than I already am. So this is interesting. So someone had posted on Reddit, this Night Maestro, edited 2 months ago. It's one of the top rated posts. Somebody had asked, like, what's going on with faction warfare? Do the mechanics still suck? Blah, 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 blah. He said and I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read the whole thing. He says it's entirely sad. The whole system is effed and unbalanced and hasn't been touched for some time. That's exactly what we're talking about here, right? In theory, it's an okay system and somewhat tries to mitigate farming for the ISK gain. It would be cool if the ISK was centralized in some way to only actual groups who are doing the major fighting to gain LP or something, though it's tough to imagine improvements that don't break what's there. Again, that's part of the problem, was it was patched to fix previous problems and then just left when it's been kind of left in the dust with new updates and such. Whenever there's major game updates and they start looking at how that affects things, they're not saying, and how does that affect Central Warfare, faction warfare? They're just busy looking at the other aspects that more people complain about. You know, squeaky wheel gets the grease. Issue with population of the sides. Amarr and Caldari have less overall. They have less than the enemy factions by a large margin, which is interesting because back when I played, we came into Amarr because they were so far behind. They were basically the bastard children of faction warfare, which is saying something. And when Fwetic came in, they helped clean that shit right up. And then we pushed back hard. One of the most crushing blows is the relevance of the LP for Gallente. It's always cash money LP, while Caldari don't have much to really cash in from their LP stores. So, again, there's an imbalance in the stores. From my personal view of the Warzone, this caused a die-out in the Cal Mill overall. That's Caldari Militia. The groups that are in Cal Mill are really good, and they are just so outnumbered, and it isn't just in active players across the militia, but the amount of central and versed faction warfare guys. And now, this is 2 months ago, we've had 2 major groups leave Cal Mill, so they're even farther behind now. They can't recoup from losses because it's an uphill battle when their LP isn't worth as much as their enemies, so that's a problem. They're saying there's not a lot of incentive to do faction warfare. Okay, it's a really hard system to check and balance in a market-driven game like EVE. Faction warfare is always the root of EVE that focuses on an individual player, not the larger group, in terms of acclamation and agency, and that does help to give its freedom and enjoyment. However, without a balance coming to this, it's a system that incentivizes a die-out of one side until something rejuvenates the LP value of one side, and then even the rebound of players is actually on the coattails of farmers that don't even fight in the war zone, just grind LP and dump on the market. There's nothing in there that I would say is wrong. It's just, again, it's kind of a sad thing. Oh no, Cypher's here. What'd you do, Cypher? Oh no, I'm afraid to look. Oh, okay. Thank you. Actually, you did a nice change. Hello, Cypher. So, Cypher, my friend, my goon friend, what I'm talking about tonight is faction warfare, and you know very well, Cypher, that faction warfare was something that was near and dear to my heart. I really, really loved that system back in the day. But it looks like it has not only gone back to how it was before the Fwetic guys got in, but it has gone back almost to the beginning, almost to 2008, with its total, utter shittiness. It is just crap of a system. And it's not that they rolled anything back. They didn't have to. They just haven't updated it. They haven't done anything with it. While the rest of EVE has been updated and done new things, faction warfare is just there. It's just hanging there, looking like the displaced family member just kind of standing in the corner, the mutants at table 9. And that just, it's such a sad thing to see go downhill. So I feel like my shiny purifier, bringing God to the masses with torpedoes, with Mjolnir torpedoes. So this is at this point, if you were to have caught me about 4 years ago and this had happened, I would probably be out there on my podcast advocating all different routes that we can go to try to save this, to change things in faction warfare to make it better, and trying to be positive. I can't even do that now. Like, I'm not being negative, but I'm just being realistic. Okay, I'm seeing it for what it is, which is, I think faction warfare needs to die. It needs to be taken away, and just let low sec be low sec, right? That could be a perfect buffer zone for industrialists that want to have that good mix of I need the good ore and supplies coming from nullsec, and I need the other supplies coming from high sec, and then that gives me a place to have markets, player markets, not JITA, not those hubs, but player markets where they can buy from both sides and create and then sell to both sides as they see fit. That's what it's there for. That's that buffer zone, right? High, low, null. But until faction warfare is either completely fixed, and I don't know how to do that, or is completely taken away, it kind of doesn't allow for that to happen. So Cypher says, yeah, it's sad. All that hype, and they had it, and it went to the wayside. Man, I remember that's TEN Evening News got its start with Dust 514, which I know you hated, and faction warfare. And Dust 514 was a big part of faction warfare. That's what it was. It was the ground. It was the boots on the ground for faction warfare. Look what happened to that. Talk about taking a dump on something. That just the biggest mistake they made was making that console only. If they would have made that a PC platform, I think they could have done something with it. Excuse me while I get a drink. They could have done something with it, because it would have given more incentive to do things. You would have had, if you got your guys on the ground fighting for a planet for resources that can only be mined on the planet, or that planet held the iHub was on that planet, whatever it is, that there's some important thing that you had to get from that planet for control of the system, or so on and so forth. And then you could have the dreads come in and do the planetary bombardments from space, which is actual players. You're on your Discord channel with your guys. You're in your Mumble chat or whatever, and you're calling in for air support. I mean, that would have made Eve a completely different game. I don't know how many of you guys have been around, like for how long you've been around, but I remember when Dust 514 was just about to come out. Oh man, I forget which one of the devs it was. One of the devs got up at FanFest and showed a test video of a dread parked in orbit around a planet, and the Dust 514 testers, alpha testers, whatever you want to call them, call in for air support. They call in for a planetary bombardment, and the dread, who's a player, starts letting loose. Boom, 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 boom. And then another ship comes in and takes out the dread, and it just shows like that different multifaceted aspect, that joint operations aspect. Hey man, what's going on? I see my buddy Sean's in there. Now I got two of my ex-hosts, my ex-partners from TEN up in the stream. How you doing, buddy? It's good to see you. I hope all's well. You guys are gonna have to hop on here soon one day. Come in and chat a little bit. Tell me how y'all are doing. Tell me about how life in Farm Simulator's going and such. Or you can come mine with us. Come do a little mining, Sean. I got my porpoise and all my mining barges. You can come out and with my 5 tunes and join me. Sean used to do a Slump 151 there. It's just about we're only missing about 3 people and we'd have everybody here, Rob. Yeah, I miss you too, man. I miss playing games with you guys a lot. That's kind of what this whole. I'm trying not to be all nostalgic about the faction warfare thing, but it's hard because we made some really good friends doing that stuff. We had some people that we palled around with. We palled around with some people. We palled around with in faction warfare, and they were good people. We had a lot of fun with them. Again, we weren't getting into these huge, big-ass blob fights, but we were getting into these little rumbles of 10 versus 10, 30 versus 30, and they were fun. And you could roll around with one of the crews for one of the Alliance crews for, an hour or two or whatever, or then some other crew would come in and pick up and be like, hey, open call to all the militia members. Anybody want to come and roll with us? We're gonna go hit some plexes and see about killing some, go kill some slaves, go kill some Minmatar. And we go roll out with them, and it was enjoyable because go in there for an hour, play around. Hey guys, I gotta go have dinner with the family. Okay, man, see you later. We'll probably be roaming when you come back. You go ahead and park, and you go back and do your thing, and you come back, right? And I know a lot of the right now, if you're in nullsec, you're like, yeah, that's what we do all the time. Spence, you're an idiot. I get that, but again, when I'm talking about like these alpha clone guys that maybe are a little intimidated by nullsec, and I know the nullsec guys are like, why would you be intimidated by nullsec? Because you all hype a lot of stuff, and people that are new to the game are like, oh my god, I can't go out there because the goons will butt rape me and things like that, right? So there's this image of what nullsec is. But for somebody who's coming in, that natural progression was supposed to be high sec to low sec via faction warfare if you wanted to be more combat oriented, and then you can do gas farming and stuff like that for boosters, and do industrial stuff in the good zones if you didn't want to be as combat oriented. You can't say not combat oriented, because once you step out of a station, congratulations, you have to be somewhat combat oriented. But that aspect is just so, it's cancerous. It's festering for years now with not enough love from the developers. And again, it's not because they did anything to break it. They've just never updated it but everything else around it updated the game. So it was just left there. It's that bastard child, right? So, sorry, I'm reading something that somebody in the chat wrote. Yeah, man, I'll get that, Cypher, I'll get that to you. We got to update all that stuff. I'll get it rolling for you. Most everything I'm going to be doing now, guys, is here on Twitch. I don't have time to do all the editing in that. It'll be Twitch, and then I'm just porting these over to YouTube. So what you see here is what you get. I'm not doing the fancy editing and all that. All the commercials we used to do, I have them all saved on a drive over here. All the old TEN Evening News commercials when we would do like evetimecode.com. We would do all their little commercials and such. I had fun doing that. That was good. But the cool thing about Twitch is I can pop on here pretty much whenever I want and shoot my mouth off, and it's automatically going to save the video for me, and I can port it over to YouTube, and it's done. I'm done with it. I don't have to worry about anything else. You just have to listen to all my ums and uhs. There's one. So, and I'm sitting in a hot room right now. My office where I do my podcasting from is actually my exotics room, where I've got a sulcata tortoise behind me over there. I've got some Australian lizards over here. I've got some tarantulas in the back corner. It's like a little zoo in here. So, but we have to keep it between like 80 and 85 degrees in here to keep the temperature and the humidity levels nominal. So while I'm in here doing this, it's getting a little hot. You know, I'm a fat guy, so it's a little hot in here. I ain't gonna lie to you. So Slump 151, who used to be okay. So when you see Slump in here, guys, he was the main podcaster on Esports at 10. Okay, he did a great job with that. He used to talk about League of Legends and a bunch of other games, StarCraft 2, stuff like that. So he says the thing I did not like is the ones with all the ISK just craps on the newbies. It's kind of tough for the noobs to get ahead. So I have noticed that since the Alpha Clone thing has come out, which I think was a great idea, by the way. I know some people don't like the whole Alpha Clone thing. I think it was a great idea to get people into EVE. I have noticed that there is a lot of help out there for Alpha Clones. There's a lot of help out there. Now, will they ever be able to get to the point that Omega Clones can do? No, they won't. But they can still have a lot of fun in the game and not pay $1. Not pay $1 to play the game. That's cool. And Alpha Clones in faction warfare in the current state it's in, they could even participate in that and do fine. As long as you don't mind losing the occasional rifter or whatever, you're good. Like, one thing that always hurted was when I lost one of these stealth bombers, because I'd have a lot of love and a lot of ISK invested into them. So, you know, if we didn't have the infrastructure to support that war, your loss is a loss. So that's another aspect. So it behooves the alliances that would be involved in faction warfare to have an industrial end. Okay? There's different aspects that you really, really needed. You needed mission runners that were PvP savvy enough to cover their own ass, because you're in low-sec and you're in faction warfare. That's your plexers. The guys hitting those plexes, right? They're going out and doing that. Then you've got your PvPers, your roamers. They're going to go out in groups and try to make sure that the zones that you hold, that your faction holds, are being held stable, and that they're able to take out roaming groups and plexers of the enemy. And then you need industrialists in the back to support. You need Logi guys and all that, of course, but that's kind of a part of the combat arm. But you need industrialists as well, and miners. You needed guys that could help produce or play the market and purchase the items that were needed for your corp to keep moving forward in your alliance. Because just like a nullsec alliance, there's no difference with that, right? You need all that infrastructure there. The problem is the difference between faction warfare doing it and like the nullsec groups doing it. In nullsec, they have a reason for doing it. They have a incentive for doing it. Holding your own area of space that has resources and has, you can do your own ratting, you can do all that, you can make ISK, you have some ISK faucets to make that money. And then you can sell off your excess that you're not using for your alliance. And then, of course, you have your internal sales in the alliance, right? If you're part of an alliance, you're a goon, you're a test, whatever you are, and you're not just necessarily going to, everything you do isn't just about the alliance, right? You might say, I'm doing this right now, I'm doing Logi right now because that's what I'm good at, but I'm working toward my caps, my capitals, or I'm working toward getting into an interdictor, whatever it is. So when it comes time to get in that interdictor, you're going to buy you're going to buy that from your alliance or whatever, right? So there's an internal purchasing system as well, but there's incentive there because they own their own space. In faction warfare, you're kind of leasing it. Okay, and it's a short-term lease because you can lose it at any time, and I know you can lose nullsec space at any time, but you usually have buffer zones and whatnot. Okay, you don't have that industrial support because until they make the system where it is lucrative enough for the industrialists to come in and stick around long term, there's not a lot of reason to do it, if that makes any sense. Sean says, wish I can get my second, what's he say? I just hated when I lost my miner. That hurts a bunch. Those things were expensive. I'll tell you what, man, I've got you covered if you do want to come back in and you want to just kind of muck about. I've got you covered. I've even got we've got a mining boss ship and whatnot that we do some fun. And again, people are, oh my god, he's a high sec Care Bear. Yeah, I do. That's where I hang out nowadays because I don't have a lot of time to play. But there is something cathartic about sitting there running my 5 mining ships with my dolphin in the middle that is, fleet boosting, and I've got my, my procurers all around me doing their thing, and a bunch of drones swarming, and then we get a couple friends that log in, and we just sit there and we shoot the crap while we mine, and we make money, we make iskies for each other, right? So, but see, there goes Cypher. Tears, Sean, give me more. He's a goon, right? He loves it. But that's all part of it. It's all part of what we do, right? But yeah, there's the point that Slump brought up about, with the new players, it was always kind of hard for them to get into it because once you got to a certain point, you either had to decide I'm comfortable with staying in high sec or I want to move on to something different. And your options at this point are pretty much, if I'm not staying in high sec, I need to go to null sec to go where there's other players in action. Low sec is kind of, I don't know, it's like that zone. Like if we were in the post-apocalyptic era and you've got these big city-states that are still surviving with big walls around them, but there's that no man's land in between them, that's low sec. Like when you drive through, you see the mutants and the rapists and the people like the cannibals and the people who live in tents. Like that's kind of what nullsec is because it's been completely abandoned by CCP. They don't even mention it in their stuff. Like in their updates and whatnot. Like even in the CSM minutes, I went through all 53 pages of their CSM minutes, and Faction Warfare was kind of like, we agree that it's broken and we don't know how to fix it. Next topic. Well, thanks. Thanks, guys. What's Sean saying now? You still have that crazy big-ass ship that I won, the Nightmare? No, the Nightmare. Unfortunately, Sean, if you, just so you know, apparently my account was hacked and banned for a while. I had to go through a Senior GM Hugin, who was very, very helpful in getting my account back because apparently a while back someone was able to get their hands on my account and liquidate a bunch of stuff. I lost all of my big stuff too, dude. I lost probably I think I lost probably about 40 billion in ships with that. Now I still have stuff on my other accounts, on my alt accounts, a lot of my expensive stuff that I don't keep on the main account, on this, my podcasting account as I call it. But yeah, it's got a hold of the podcasting account, kind of ran amok in the corporate, some of the corporate stuff that they could get into, but most of the stuff we had passworded and locked in containers, couldn't really do much there. And yeah, that got sold off on the open market by probably some Russians, because it all happened right around the time the TEN website went down when those Russian hackers DDoSed it. So I think that's probably what happened. Yeah, exactly. Well, no, see, once you get into nullsec, they're just, they're no longer mutants. They're just rapists, and that's Rob. That's definitely Rob. But so we're coming up on the 1 hour mark for the show. See, in the podcast, you would never know that I'm taking a drink because we would just edit that out. But yeah. Hey, don't forget, guys, if you're in here watching, which I really do appreciate all y'all that are kind of in here with us, don't forget to go ahead and click that follow button for me. I really appreciate it, and it does help out with making sure that I can get the information across to you guys when the shows come out. Just so you know, my channel is not just dedicated to Eve. I need to make sure that you guys understand that. I'm a Navy guy, and my interest is more in games that involve vessels, ships, things like that. All from space, from whatever. You might occasionally see me play some Black Wake. I might play some World of Warships. I'll announce it ahead of time. But at least 3 nights a week, I will be doing TEN Evening News and focusing on Eve because this is my primary thing. Like I said, when I do this stuff, you're not going to see me doing a lot of roams and things like that. Occasionally we will. But mostly we'll be talking about topics. We'll be having discussions, all right, that I want you guys to participate in, and we'll have guests on here that we'll be doing interviews with. Sometimes that I'll do the interviews offline, and we'll play it on the show, and I'll do a live commentary about that, okay? Because especially since there is a big time sink between Reykjavik, Iceland, and Houston, Texas, where I'm at. I would definitely like to start getting more. Any of you guys that run a corporation, I don't care if you're in high sec, low sec, null sec, if you're in an alliance and you're an officer or a diplomat or whatever, you want to come on and talk about your group and the things you do and your take on Eve, and you want to kind of plug your stuff, let me know. I'll get you on the show. We love doing stuff like that. It helps the game grow. Okay. If you are interested in having your corp or your alliance plugged on the show, let me know. You can pay an ISK and you can advertise with us. So we do that. We used to make quite a lot of ISK back in the day doing show advertising on our podcast. Hey, what was the name of that? Oh man, I probably don't even have it in here anymore. There was the place that did you can like gamble. Remember what it was called? You guys remember? Help me out here. Y'all should know. What was the name of that place? Summer Blink. That was it. Summer Blink. Right here. Summer Blink was one of the coolest things that they had in Eve, and they discontinued it, right? You can't go to Summer Blink anymore and do the. You used to be able to buy the boxes for the ships, and then it would randomly select one, and then they'd send that ship to you, and you'd get a little notice that in Jitty you had a ship. That's how we got that nightmare for Rob, as a matter of fact, or not for Rob, for Sean, was through Summer Blink. But Summer Blink used to pay us lots and lots of iskies to advertise their stuff, and we were happy to do it. That we had like a little time code and everything, or a code. So yeah, I'm gonna go to it. Let's see if it's still up. I doubt it is. Nope, site not configured. It's all gone now. Wow, that sucks. I'm kind of fanboying a bit, but I did absolutely love Summer Blink. Wow, look at all those famous people I got in here that you don't really see around anymore. So I'm sorry, I'm getting nostalgic now, guys. So yeah, back in the day with all our stuff. Here was one of my. Pinky was one of our good friends. We used to run around a lot with Pinky. That was one of our faction warfare dudes. So, yep, EveBet, Summer Blink, and all gambling sites are banned from Eve via the EULA. And it's funny that when that happened, I kind of remember when that all went down, because Eve had said it's cool, you can do it because you're not betting real money, you're not doing stuff like that. It's not violating anything because it's an in-game. It's metagaming. And then all of a sudden, one day, I don't know what happened. They talked to the Eve lawyer, the CCP lawyers or something, and just the next day, bam! It was all shut down. Like they made it all stop. So that kind of sucked. So we'll have to do a show on that one day too. So all the lotteries, remember the lotteries, Eve Lottery and all that? They had some really cool stuff, and that made it fun because when you were sitting here, spinning your ships and talking and doing a podcast or a live episode or whatever, you could put up Summer Blink while you're sitting there and bet and win stuff. It was quite fun. So anyway, I have bored you guys enough for one night. I'm going to go ahead and I had a long day at work today, and I came right home and I got in here to make sure I got this episode in. But I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping things up because it's time for me to go eat some dinner and spend time with the family. Yeah, Pinky Feldman was a cool cat. You're absolutely right, Cypher. He was a good guy. He used to get some. He used to really stir people up. We had him on. We had the Fletic guys on a TEN Evening News podcast once to talk about faction warfare and Amarr versus Minmatar in particular, and he intentionally got so trolly and just got people riled up that faction warfare actually kicked off a series of fights for about 10 days because the Minmatar got so pissed off about the stuff he said that we had some really good fights for about 10 days. And he even said, he's like, man, the only reason why I did that was to see if we can get some good fights out of this. And we did. He was a pretty good guy. He was good at that. So, I don't know. It doesn't look like he plays anymore, and that sucks. He was a good guy. Anyway, oh yeah, so Cypher says it was found that some of the sites were real money trading on the side, some of the sites, not all of them. Well, I can see that being a problem, but that's one of the things when you punish everybody for the actions of a few. I don't know. I don't really consider that justice. Summerblink was a cool meta of this game. It was a cool side thing to do. Yeah, it was neat, especially when like you could say like instead of winning the ship and taking the ship or the module that you won, you could say instead I would like Summerblink credit, and you would get more than what the ship was kind of worth, so to speak, and you could take that back in credit, and that's where they got you hooked. That's where the gambling started really getting into it. I mean, there was sometimes that like we'd be like, oh man, I gotta stop, I'm almost broke. I'd have like, I'd be up like 300 million ISK, and then the next thing I know, I'm completely broke. And I'm like, well, I guess I got to go mine or run missions or something. So, Sean, it was good to see you again too, man. We got to talk one day, bud. See, I want to catch up, see how you and the family are doing. Thanks for popping in. All right, guys. With that, we're at the 1 hour and 6 minute mark. I am going to go ahead and kill this for the evening, so I can go spend time with the fam. Thank you so much for tuning in to TEN Evening News, and I will see you guys again on Saturday evening. I'll be back. Okay, on Saturday evening, we'll be back with. I'll put it up on Twitter, and on here I'll announce it. And don't forget, inside of Eve, the TEN Evening News chat channel, I'll put whatever the topic for Saturday is going to be once I figure out what the hell it's going to be. So thank you so much. I appreciate your support. Please click that follow button. It really helps me out, and it allows me to keep in touch with you about when we go live and so on and so forth. And we will see you guys on Saturday. Fly safe.